Hello students, this video will go over the classwork assignment from 2.2, how to create a skyline sketch from photo references. Now remember, this sketch should be a skyline from your borough, neighborhood, city. If you have trouble finding a picture, please email me. I have some examples of good ones that would be to practice. The key things that I'm going to go over today in the video are how to create layers to show space, layers of overlap, so to create a foreground, midground, and background, and then how to use shading to create the illusion that some buildings are in front of or behind other buildings. So again, the steps are: first, you create the sketch of the outline, then you add the shading to show the overlapping or the midground, foreground, midground, and background. But first, a couple of tips on how to pick pictures. So obviously, open up Google and type, it could be, your borough, and then just end with the word skyline. Skyline will give you pictures that have that nice tiered skyline, and look for pictures that have layers, right? So this picture here is a great example. It has some poofy trees at the bottom, then it has some buildings in front of buildings in front of buildings, and then it has this iconic, building in the background. So this would be an excellent example. A lot of these would be excellent examples. Great example. It's got water, it's got some trees, it's got a highway, then it has buildings. So look for pictures that have overlap. You want to avoid pictures that are, from up above looking down, because there's not as many layers on these photographs. And then obviously avoid, so here's another example, up above looking down, and then avoid line art. This is actually an example of what we're going to be creating once we get into the digital part of this project. So again, look for examples that have great overlap, so front, medium, back, and it's easy to see that in the photograph. So with that, I found this excellent example in Brooklyn that I'm going to be drawing from that includes the Brooklyn Bridge, because I know some of you had asked, like, how do I do the bridge if the bridge is in front? So I'm going to demonstrate using this photograph. I think this is the Manhattan skyline from the Brooklyn waterfront looking back on the Freedom Tower and this Frank Gehry building. So with that, let's get into the drawing and I'll show you the steps. I'll go through the steps. So I am going to speed up the video so that this video is not too long. I'm going to be using just a simple pencil and eraser for this sketch. If you have a pen, you can, but the pencil is good for doing some shading. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rectangle. The rectangle is going to help to keep my frame and just keep me thinking about, like, where is the building in relation to the picture? Is it in the bottom third, middle third, or top third? Or is it off to the right or the left? Or is it smack dab in the middle? So next I'm going to start, and I'm slowly going to add those levels, pressing lightly at first and then gradually pressing harder and harder. And I'm going to start with the foreground features. In this case, there's kind of like a low level along the waterfront where there's trees and there's a little park if you've ever been over there. But there is the bridge in front of even that park in this one little part. So that's the only tricky part if you're doing a drawing that has a bridge. The bridge kind of crosses over and is in front of all the buildings that are behind it. But this is okay as long as you start lightly with pencil first and then you put your layers behind the bridge. So I'm going to put the bridge in front, and then I'm going to start to tuck in these lower buildings, the buildings that are kind of along the middle of the midground. I'm not dealing with those iconic background buildings yet, but I'm kind of bouncing back and forth. I'm doing just simple rectangles for a lot of those boring basic buildings, but I am pulling some of those essential or key shapes from the photograph. So especially when you get to the area where there's the Freedom Tower in this artwork, or if you have the World Trade Center, or you have the Empire State Building, you want to pull those essential features from the photograph in that case. But for the most part, like your buildings can just be rectangles, your trees can just be like puffy little round trees. But now that I've got a good sense of layering here, I'm going to now start to turn my pencil sideways and start to create those levels. And as I'm working on creating those levels, I'm going to press super hard to get a really dark foreground. And then I'm going to press really light to get a really light background buildings. And then in the middle, I'm just trying to create steps that are in between. So what you're going to see me doing here is I'm going to press real hard to establish what is the darkest dark that I can get with this pencil. And then what is the lightest light that I can get for those background buildings. And then I'll put the other buildings kind of like in the middle there. And here with this shading, I stop looking at the picture completely. Like the picture doesn't even matter at this point. Only thing that really matters is that I'm creating those steps of value from dark to medium to light as I go from front to back. The only time I will look at the picture is like right around now. I'm noticing that when I did my shading, those middle buildings kind of disappeared. So I do need to kind of go back in and press a little harder to just bring the edges of all of my levels back out. Because what I'm going to now do is simplify this crazy photograph down into like 4 layers. There's the bridge layer, there's the tree shrub park layer, then there's one low level of buildings, and then there's one tall level of buildings. I know this is not exact, but it is a little easier if you just try to simplify it down to 4. And then the last thing I'm doing is just adding a little touches of texture into the water. But for the most part, that is it. I'm just going to touch this up again using the point of my pencil, pressing really hard to get really dark textures for the foreground. But if you have any questions or you're struggling to create those levels, please come to the work time on Friday at 5th period. If you're going to another class at that time, please email me. We can set up another time to meet during the day and go over this assignment. The key is that you have this part done so that we're ready for the larger either digital or watercolor paint part of this assignment next week. Hope everybody is safe and well and have a great day.